Well, good afternoon, everyone. It looks like people are filing in from the waiting room, so we're really excited to see you all here today for a great session on the upcoming spring 2023 grants that the South Dakota Arts Council is offering. I know I spent quite a bit of time this morning getting all our materials kind of in order and looking through the narratives and the new documents that you've provided, Kate. So really excited to have everyone join us today. We have with us Kathryn Vandel and Patrick Baker from the South Dakota Arts Council, as well as Jim Spears from Arts South Dakota, and my name is Andrew Reinertz. I'm the Community Development Director here with Arts South Dakota. Before we get started, just wanted to quick say thank you to the partners that have made this possible. Funding from the South Dakota Arts Council, as well as the Bush Foundation and the National Endowment for the Arts. We really very much thank them. We wouldn't be able to do this without all of their support. There will be a few times during the course of the webinar today that we'll have some Q&A with our guest panelists. I would ask that if you would please use the Q&A function of Zoom. That's the easiest way for us to track all your questions and then to be able to address them later on in the session. But also feel free to use the chat, say hello to everyone, say hello to the panelists or to the other attendees, and any other technical needs that you might have, please put those in the chat. A couple of other upcoming webinars I wanted to point you all to, in particular, coming in a couple of weeks, Wednesday, February 8th, we're going to have a panel of panelists. So as many of you who have applied for grants know, your grants are actually reviewed by a panel of folks in the industry and people from the South Dakota Arts Council, the council members, not the staff. And so we have three people: Brian Bieber, a writer and filmmaker from Sioux Falls; Jane Rasmussen, the director of the Sisseton Arts Council; and our own Jim Spears, who have served on panels, whether for national grants or for the South Dakota Arts Council grants and other states. So it's really exciting to be able to have their perspective. And sorry, apparently it's Fritz's scratch time in the background, so you're hearing a lot of extra jingling and jangling. But it's really exciting to have these folks who have served as panelists and reviewed grants kind of give a little bit of their perspective of what makes their job easier, you know, because so often these folks know absolutely nothing about you. They don't know what you've done in the past. They only know what's in the application in front of them. And so I think it'll be a unique perspective on some tips and tricks for grant writing. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our Executive Director, Jim Spears, to say a couple of words before we get started.
Thank you, Andrew, and good to see everyone, and especially Patrick and Kate. Good to see you guys again. I'm glad to be participating in this panel, and it's the season of webinars. We have several here in a row, and it seems like an appropriate time when we're all stuck in our houses here in the snowbanks. So thank you, Andrew and Sherry and Sarah on our team for just all the work it takes to pull these together. But it is really a great opportunity for the arts community to learn and network. So I'm looking forward to the upcoming webinars, as well as some other programs that we have coming up this spring for professional development. Yeah, I'm excited to introduce our panelists today, our speakers today. We work very closely with the team at the South Dakota Arts Council. We have Arts South Dakota and the South Dakota Arts Council have a very strategic partnership, one that often is maybe even confused. I've been introduced as the director of the South Dakota Arts Council more than once. And while clarity is important, we often talk about how I think that confusion really is also sort of a good indication of how well we work together and how important the partnership is. We have a collective and unified voice, and I think the programs that we're able to support and conduct would not happen if this partnership didn't exist, if we didn't have this great team. One of those things that I want to share, and you may have noticed in our weekly newsletter last week, but Patrick and I just last week were in Pierre at the State Tourism Conference, and we presented a breakout session on the intersection of tourism and the arts. And as we all know, tourism is it's a major economy here in South Dakota. It's our second largest industry, and we strongly believe that the arts are a huge factor in that. And as we move forward and we grow South Dakota's tourism infrastructure, the arts are essential to that growth. So it was exciting to be in Pierre and for Patrick and I to be part of that event. And then we'll be back in Pierre in a couple of weeks. And I'm sure you've heard about this. All of our attendees have heard about the Governor's Awards in the Arts. That's coming up here in about 3 weeks, February 15. And it's a special night. Really, it's the main attraction is the honoring of 6 individuals or organizations that will receive the prestigious award of Governor's Awards in the Arts. And so if you have the opportunity, if you're near Pierre, live close to Pierre, or want to make that beautiful drive in February to Pierre, South Dakota, we'd love to have you join us. You can find more information about that on our website, but please know all are welcome. It's a really, really fun night. And it's a special night. We'd like to have as many from the arts family there as possible. So I'm going to turn it over to Patrick, but I just want to first mention that the South Dakota Arts Council is really the primary driver of so many arts activities in our state. They really are the seed that starts so many of the things that we take for granted sometimes. So many of the experiences, the arts programs and institutions across South Dakota really start with support from the South Dakota Arts Council. And without stealing Patrick's thunder, I just want to say that, you know, a couple of years ago, FY21, the Arts Council awarded $1.3 million in grant support to 140 events, 109 different sites across South Dakota, resulting in 299 grants. Again, Patrick's probably going to say all this again, but I just want to say from an advocacy and a nonprofit standpoint, it's amazing work, and it really does. It really is the foundation of our arts ecosystem. So this is an important webinar, and we thank you, Patrick and Kate, for joining us and sharing your expertise. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and the director of South Dakota Arts Council, Patrick Baker.
Well, thank you very much, Jim. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to Arts South Dakota for hosting us here today. We're really excited to be presenting to such a large group, and this is the perfect time to be talking to you about our grant support, because our grant application is open. You're going to hear a whole lot of details. But first, I am Patrick Baker. I'm the Executive Director of the South Dakota Arts Council. As of next month in February, I will have been in this position for 7 years. And I want to let Kate introduce herself before I go on with a little more introduction.
Sorry, I seem to have lost my toolbar. Hi, my name is Kate Vandel. I'm the grant specialist with the South Dakota Arts Council. I've been in this position since 2019, working with the Arts Council since 2016. And I just want to thank you all for being here today. I will just pass it back over to Patrick.
So Jim Spears did a wonderful job of giving you an overview of the impact that our grant making can have on the South Dakota arts sector. But I'll just tell you a few things about us. The South Dakota legislature created the South Dakota Arts Council in 1966. So that means that we have been operating here in South Dakota for 57 years. Now, our vision as an agency is really to transform communities and people through the arts. But one of our major goals, and one of the ways that we do that, is by trying to unify and to help coordinate the arts throughout the state of South Dakota. And we do that with a number of things in mind: public service, arts education programs, access and inclusion, cultural tourism, also acting as the stewards of our federal funds from the National Endowment for the Arts, and then most importantly and germane to today's conversation, through grants and services. Really, what does that mean? It means that we are trying to make quality arts opportunities accessible to all South Dakotans throughout the entire state of South Dakota, and to visitors as well. And so that's what you're gonna hear more about today. Some of these slides that you're seeing are some of these very events and opportunities that are supported by grants from the South Dakota Arts Council. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to grant specialist Kate Vandel so she can start digging into the specifics of how to apply for grant support from the South Dakota Arts Council.
Thanks, Patrick. I do just want to let everyone know that our applications are open online, and the link is shown here on the screen. The application system closes at 11:59 p.m. Central, and late applications will not be accepted. If you need support with an online application, please contact the South Dakota Arts Council as soon as possible. We're willing and able to do our best to accommodate your needs. We recommend that you all read all of the grant guidelines before starting any application. Incomplete applications will not be considered or reviewed. So it's really important that you know what you need ahead of getting started in your application. You'll see our mainline staff information, both our email and our phone number are posted here on the screen. Any staff person can help you with the application process. I'm the default for grant questions, so you'll see my contact information there as well. And I do just want to let everyone know that Andrew is amazing in sharing these slides out after the webinar. So there's a lot of content on these slides. I am not going to read it to you. It's really just there so you can see it and refer back to it after the webinar is over. So like I said, we have a lot of resources available for grantees. Since 2017, staff has made a concerted effort to improve the resources and information available to potential grant applicants and also our grantees. The Applicant Portal link, which you'll see here, houses our grant guidelines, which I just asked that you all read. Samples of the full application, so you can go in and find a PDF copy of the exact application that you will be applying for. And then we've also provided templates so that you can build your narrative ahead of completing your application. You'll find all the narrative questions included in those templates. Staff contact information is posted there. We're a mighty staff of 4, 5 with a folklore specialist helping our traditional arts apprenticeship grantees. So we've just got 1 up on the Arts South Dakota staff. And then you'll find webinar slides and a Q&A session schedule. We host what we call water cooler chats every Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock. You'll find information on that schedule as well as how to interact with those conversations. And then we also have posted just some general good tools for applicants to use. Sorry, I'm trying to work between a few screens here. We have grant opportunities available right now for both artists and organizations. We're working to fund activities, events, programs, projects, or work taking place between July 1st, 2023 and June 30th of 2024. As it is our mission, as Patrick said, to make quality arts programs accessible throughout the state, the Arts Council does not support activities outside the arts disciplines that you'll find listed here. Again, applicants that do not meet the eligibility requirements will not be considered. So if you have questions about eligibility or anything else that you find in our application process, please contact the Arts Council staff. We'll kick off our conversation with our opportunities for artists. The Arts Council has 5 categories of support for individuals that are listed here. And I'm just going to provide a little bit more information on each of these grant categories. Artists can only apply for 1 grant. And so we have provided a cheat sheet, which is posted on our applicant portal with more insight into each of these categories as well, and to help you decide which category to apply for. The Artist Career Development grants are $2,000. They support individuals to produce new artwork, market or promote their work, reach new audiences, purchase equipment or materials, but are not limited to these examples. Artist fellowships are $5,000. They support artists to explore and build their practice and encourage future growth. Artist collaboration grants are $6,000. They support artists working in the same or different disciplines and from the same or different states. Traditional arts apprenticeships are grants of up to $5,000. The master may be a South Dakota artist or reside in a nearby state. Traditional arts apprenticeship grants have specific guidelines and questions, as well as review criteria, and those guidelines are posted separately on the application portal. Artist project grants support opportunities for public engagement with and access to the arts. They require a one-to-one match. Artists may request up to 50% of projected expenses or $2,000. As far as eligibility, as I said, artist grants support any South Dakota-based individual committed to advancing their artistic work and career. Specific residency requirements are listed here and also in the guidelines. Again, applications that do not meet eligibility requirements will not be reviewed. So make sure that if you have questions on your own eligibility or whether or not you can apply, please contact us before starting your application. The last thing we want is for someone to invest time and energy into an application that won't be reviewed. Recent artist grantees are prohibited from applying for some grants. This grid is included in our grant guidelines. And if you're not sure when you got your grant, you can use the website posted here to find which year you got your grant. All of our past grantees are listed by fiscal years, which run from July 1st through June 30th. I seem to have missed a slide. All right, sorry about that. In addition to the eligibility requirements, the grant guidelines include restrictions and all funding parameters. And these are a few of those types of funding parameters that are restrictions on application or on activities. I do just want to call out a few. Like I said earlier, artists are only applying in one category of support. We cannot grant to individuals and organizations seeking funding for the same project. And make sure that your planned work and all recorded income and expenses fall within the grant period, which, as I said, runs July 1st, 2023 through June 30th of 2024. Moving on to organizations now. Starting with eligibility for organizations to apply. We grant to the following South Dakota-based organizations, and we'll dig into these definitions on the next slide. So we are granting to nonprofit, tax-exempt organizations, units of state or local government, and that includes public schools or public school systems, federally organized or recognized tribal governments. And I do just want to note that beginning in April, I think, of 2022, the federal government is now requiring what's called a unique entity identifier from the System for Award Management. I'm sorry, I always just call it SAM.gov. And you'll find resources to help you get your UEI from SAM on the applicant portal as well. The process has streamlined significantly since we saw it start in April. And so if you've tried before and been unsuccessful, we would encourage you to start that process again or contact SAM and get some support in why you didn't receive your number the first time. You will not need a DUNS number for your application this year or moving forward with us in terms of getting support. So digging into some of those definitions a little bit deeper, when we say South Dakota-based organizations, we mean that you are registered with the South Dakota Secretary of State's office and your registration is in good standing. When we say tax exempt, we mean that you are registered as a 501c3 with the IRS. And we use these links when you apply to vet your application. We encourage you to use these links to check on your status, again, ahead of starting your application. We do not grant to organizations that will then re-grant funds to another organization. Any organization presenting religious activities or presenting activities during a religious service, or individuals and organizations seeking support for the same project. The only opportunity that we have available for organizations right now is our project grants. And project grant support opportunities for public engagement with and access to the arts. These also require a one-to-one match, and organizations may request up to 50% of projected expenses or $5,000. The South Dakota Arts Council does not provide funding for a range of ineligible expenses. When building your budget, you should only include allowable expenses and avoid any of the items on this list or the list on the next slide. As I said at the beginning, there's a lot of information here. I know that Andrew will share these slides out, and these restrictions are also included in our guidelines. And we'll dig into some of these in our FAQ at the end, if and when we have time. Again, the full list of restrictions, definitions, and for allowable expenses, indirect costs, and travel rates are included in the grant guidelines, just as a reminder. Make sure that you read those grant guidelines ahead of starting your application and have those on hand when you're building your budget. So as Andrew said, we work through grant review just like a lot of other organizations do. We build panels. So grant review panels evaluate and score all of the applications based on the artistic merit and artistic excellence of each proposal. You'll find the full scoring criteria in our grant guidelines. We as staff, as I said, vet all applications that come in ahead of panel review, and we're looking for eligibility, and we'll contact any applicants that we have questions about your application. Panels consist of both in-state and out-of-state arts professionals and are facilitated by board and staff members. Service on our panels is limited to 2 years, so we are rotating people through. So it's likely if you applied the last cycle, you're not going to be reviewed by the same panel this cycle. And you'll see our deadlines. If you paid attention, you've seen our deadline on every single slide since we started. I do just want to remind everyone that that grant deadline, that grant system closes at 11:59 p.m. Central on March 1st. We do have what we call a draft review. And this is an opportunity for staff to review your submission, your application prior to that final deadline. And staff will review the grant narrative, budget, and support materials for compliance and consistency. We'll also help you improve your applications by checking for mistakes or omissions that may cause ineligibility, but we also look for things that may cause questions from our panelists. We do not provide grammatical editing or rewriting services, and we do provide feedback back to you in time for you to make those corrections and submit your application on time. The draft review deadline is February 14th, and that system closes at 11:59 p.m. as well. Just a few things to remember when you're building your application. And Patrick and I will do a little Q&A back and forth as well as an FAQ at the end of this. But these are things that I'm sure you'll hear on that next webinar from Arts South Dakota. That panel of panelists are probably not going to, they'll probably have a lot more information for you, but it'll probably be centered around a lot of the same bullet points that you see on this screen. Our grant funding is competitive. Please write your application with the review criteria in mind, and that is why we build those grant guidelines separate from the application, so you can have those open and ready at the same time as you're building your narrative, your budget, picking your work samples, getting everything together for your application. Follow the instructions and the guidelines, and I would repeat this one probably indefinitely. And please contact the staff if you have any questions about any part of the application. We're really here to help you apply, and we really want to give you money. So make sure that you're submitting a good application. Again, incomplete applications will not be reviewed, so make sure you're answering all the questions and providing all the requested materials. Be clear and concise and consistent with your information. That's definitely something that a lot of panelists will pick up on. Do not assume that panelists know you or your organization, and proofread your application before you submit. It's always good to have a third party, somebody that doesn't know you or isn't invested in what you're doing, is always great person to go to look through your application, because if you're missing anything, someone that knows you and knows your work is unlikely to find those things you're missing. So that's just a good tip. We do have some upcoming additional opportunities to those grants that we've already discussed today. One of those is our Artists in Schools and Communities residency applications are now being accepted through March 10th. For more information, you can find that at the link online. And this program is open to the same eligible organizations as we included above, but I do just want to hit on those again. Those are nonprofit tax exempt organizations, units of state or local government, which again includes public schools, public school systems, and federally recognized tribal governments. Applications for residencies will also need that UEI. So just adding that to the mix again. We will also have our Artists in Schools and Communities and Touring Arts roster open for application in July with a deadline of September 4th. Participation on the artist rosters will begin on July 1st of 2024. And then the last thing I want to hit on is an opportunity for you to serve as a panelist. The Arts Council is looking for individuals with experience or expertise in the arts to serve as panelists. Please contact the staff if you're interested. There is a form posted out there for you to nominate yourself or someone else, and more information can be found on that same website as well. So that is all I have on that side of the content. Andrew, I will turn it back over to you. We do have some frequently asked questions prepared that we can go through. But if there's been a lot of questions coming in, we can certainly field those first.
Yeah, we're getting a couple of questions, one or two, and I'm gonna make sure I can pop myself back on the screen here. There we go. One question that came through, if you are applying as an organization for Artists in Schools and Communities, can you also still apply for a project grant, or are those considered overlapping grants?
That's a great question. And no, there's no prohibition. If you were to apply for a project grant, you could also apply for the Artists in Schools and Communities program.
Great, thanks. And also, please, everyone, a few questions are coming in, but file all your questions into the Q&A, and we'll definitely get to all of them. Another one is, this is maybe getting a little bit difficult to answer. It might be more of a reach out to you, but if an artist is involved in an organization as either running the organization or on their board, and they're applying for an individual artist grant, you mentioned that they can't apply for grants for the same project. How far apart do those need to be? I mean, is it the kind of thing where an individual artist just if it's a project that the organization is at all involved with, even if it's a different program from the one they're applying for, or should it just be the individual artist one should really be something completely separate from the organization, or is it more of a case by case?
Kate, and I don't mean to put you in the hot seat, but I might defer to you and suggest that the budget in your application may very well tell the tale. And I think Kate can offer some tips on what I mean by that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, ironically enough, I just got this question posed to me this week. So like Patrick said, we would need to see kind of clear lines or clear lanes of budgeting for those projects. I guess myself, I would say, if I was an individual artist and I was also working with the Arts Council, I would be able to apply for my own work and my own kind of path forward, as well as apply on behalf of my organization. So if I'm looking for a specific project or specific work for my organization to take on, that's its own path forward. If I'm hiring myself as an artist for the organization, that would be, I would say that would be a no. But as long as you have kind of two separate lanes of this is my project, this is my work, I'm an artist and I'm doing this, I work at this organization and we're bringing Andrew and Jim in to participate as musicians. And so I'm going to apply for a project grant. That would be totally fine. We would have no issue with that at all. Yep.
And maybe just one hypothetical to add to that. So let's say I'm going to make this up. There is no such thing as the Pure Area Arts Council. We're proud to have the Shortgrass Arts Council here, but let's say there's a Pure Area Arts Council. Let's say you are a working artist who sits on that board. And let's say the Pure Area Arts Council has applied for a project grant, even for general operations, for a number of different projects, let's say, not even one specific project. Let's say you as an artist are working with the local chamber or visitors bureau, or potentially a local business to paint a mural. And you wanted to apply for some funds to help with that process, to buy materials for the project, to help support payment of you as the artist, as long as that was not overlapping in any way with any of the projects that we're also helping fund through the Pure Area Arts Council, you would be okay. Those would be two separate lanes.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I know it gets where, you know, some of it is, I think the arts world is small to begin with, but then in South Dakota, so many of us are so passionate that we're often, you know, even if we're an individual artist, we're either working for a nonprofit or on their board or somehow involved, and there's a lot of overlap. And the good news about a lot of these questions coming in, I think, is that it's also showing there's a lot of collaboration happening. And I think that's a really good thing to see. And, you know, these are good sticky problems to work through. Great, we're seeing a lot of other great questions come in here. I'm kind of trying to sort them a little bit as we go. So when we go back to the draft review process, how are those submitted? Are those also submitted through the GoSmart online portal?
Yeah, they are, Andrew. So when you get to the end of your application, you'll see an option to apply, to submit your application for draft review, or to just submit your application. So you'll select that option for draft review, and it will come in with a kind of in the system, it shows that you've requested draft review. So I know to look through it ahead of the application deadline. So yeah, when you've completed the entire application and you get through to that submit button, you'll see an option to be able to submit early for draft review. And then obviously after February 14th, that won't be an option for applicants anymore. Yep.
Great. I really love that, because you're able to, you're not having to do two separate processes. You're able to input it the way it's going to be and then get the draft review, make the changes. You know, you're not having to submit something different, which is really helpful.
Yeah. And I will just say, you know, we take the draft review process very seriously. You know, all staff, we distribute those among staff, and everyone on our staff looks through those. We look through the narrative, we highlight questions. If there's issues in your budget, we call those out. Whereas when we are vetting an application, we are really just digging in on those eligibility requirements. Does your budget match? Does your income match your expenses? Are you meeting your cash match? Those are the kinds of things that we look at when we vet, and we do vet every single application that comes in as well. But that draft review is really an opportunity for you to get constructive feedback on the kind of the nips and tucks in your application that may need to be done to kind of take it through to the panel without any question. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to get funding. Nothing guarantees that you're going to get funding, but that's just something that we really do take it seriously, and we take a lot of time in getting those comments back to our applicants ahead of time.
Yeah, that's one of the nice things. You know, we'll talk a lot about this on our February 8th panel of panelists webinar, but honestly, I really appreciate the fact that the Arts Council isn't involved, because then you're really able to be the advocates for the applicants. You know, as you mentioned, you really want to give money away to these folks. You really want them to have the best possible application. And so it's nice to be able to have the resource of the staff to help you, and they're not having to worry about that conflict of interest of reviewing them later, because there's a totally separate panel that does that. I'm going to try to group together a few kind of general eligibility questions. For project grants, which is the only grant open right now to organizations, so I'm assuming that's what this question is, but an anonymous question was, are organizations who received a grant last year eligible to receive another grant this year?
Yes, yes, work, and you'll see this in the application as well. You can come back for a project grant year after year. Work does not have to be new. We do just ask that if you are applying as a second year, third year applicant, that you take the time to really dig in on, what were your numbers and totals and audience projections, so that you're reporting on the most recent data, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. Not just pulling up that application maybe from 2 years ago, but really digging in on, what the work looks like, post going through it one time, and what that would look like going through it in the upcoming grant cycle, if that's helpful.
Great, thanks. We have another question here from Rachel. So she's a teacher at a small private school. How does that work for the private school versus public schools as far as the eligibility to apply?
I think I can speak to that one. Great question. No, a private school would be ineligible for our organizational grant funding. That said, a lot of private schools do have 501c3 partnership organizations, whether that might be a parent-teacher organization who has a 501c3 status or some type of auxiliary or a foundation. Also, there is an opportunity for educators at private schools to apply for something we have called an arts educator grant. So that would be able to help support. Now, that would come to you as an individual grant. There would be, some tax that you would be responsible for, like any individual artist grantee, but it could help support arts-related projects in your classroom, even at a private school.
Yeah, and I'm assuming as long as it's a 501c3, if it's, say, something for a band program, as long as there's a band boosters, that is a full 501c3, and they're the ones submitting the grant, that kind of a thing could work as well. Yeah, great.
Absolutely.
Before getting to a couple of interesting mural-related questions, on the individual artist side, does an individual artist need to have either a UI number or an EIN? The question also asks about a 501c3, but individual artists I know do not need a 501c3. And then do you require them to have either an EIN or a UI number?
No, we do not. In the event that you are granted, we do send you a W-9. And so we would need a W-9 on file with the state to be able to issue payment. And that's really the biggest reason why we're requiring an EIN from federal, 501c3s. It also helps us run a 501c3 check on you with the IRS. But for those individuals, only if you are granted funds, we would request, information from you to be able to pay you with the state.
And that W-9 for individuals, if most artists have probably ended up having to fill one out at some point or another, but if you haven't, it's just name, address, and social security number if you don't have some sort of an EIN as an individual. With some do, but very few. So just social security or other identifying number. Great. Well, a couple of interesting questions here related to murals. One is from Rachel with the Brookings Arts Council, who mentioned that renovations and constructions do not qualify for grants, but they have a space within their building that they're looking to potentially hire a muralist. Would the hiring of a muralist qualify? And then my follow-up question would be, even if you can't have renovations or constructions, if you're renovating a space to be able to be used for your mural, does that count? How would that play in? Or I should say, instead of renovating, it'd be more if I need to repair a wall to prepare it to be able to be used, if that makes more sense.
I'll take the easy one. Kate, so if you want to start preparing your answer on renovation, that's wonderful. Absolutely. If you wanted to bring an artist in to create a mural, whether that were on the exterior of a building, on the interior of a building, really what you would be likely applying for funds from us would be to pay that artist. That could include materials as well. for the project. And there would be all sorts of costs associated with that would all be eligible, that would not fall under those capital improvement types of expenses that we are unable to provide grant support for. Renovation is a little bit more of a gray area, and I want to see what Kate might be able to offer there.
Yeah, so thanks to our increase in funding through American Rescue and CARES, I would repeat what we said to a lot of people during that period. There's certain things that we can and can't fund. It really gets into a very gray area when we're talking about renovation, when we're talking about preparation for a project like a mural. That would still be a capital asset. I just don't see how you can divide those two things out. So what we would strongly recommend, which is what we recommended to people that asked similar questions during both CARES and ARPA, was look at your total budget for all the work that your organization does. And if there's anything that you can move a bucket around and use our grant funding in an eligible way, that's what we would recommend. So if you're planning on hiring an artist, even if you're planning on having community or conversations that you want the artist to lead, you want to create a community mural and you want to have the artist come in and give these talks ahead of the mural taking place. That would be an opportunity for you to pay the artist, to pay a rental fee, to book a space, to be able to have those conversations. And that may be something that you've just budgeted in a different section of your budget. So move all of those eligible things into one bucket and see where it lands you, and then apply for that total bucket of eligible expenses. Then you may find that you're kind of squeezing out a little bit of money here and there that you can prep the wall ahead of bringing the muralist in, or you can fix the lighting around the mural before you get started on it. So that would be where I would start with trying to figure out how to make that work if I do have a wall that needs some reconstructive work. And like Patrick said, renovation work is a very gray area. I'm happy to have a conversation offline if you have specific questions or specific things that we kind of talk through. But this does come down not only from our own guidelines and restrictions that are part of administrative rule and codified law, but these are also based in the restrictions that we have from the National Endowment for the Arts. So it may be a conversation that we need to kind of throw up the flagpole and see where it lands with the NEA. But that's kind of how we draw the line, is if there are eligible expenses, try to allocate those eligible expenses all together and then apply for that big bucket.
Great, thank you. With so much of this, it's very helpful that you have these frameworks but there are a lot of things that are gray or interpretable, and so it's really, as we've all talked about, the more you can just give them an email or a call Kate, and then she can chase down. And it's very difficult. I mean, I give the Arts Council a lot of credit just having applied for an NEA grant directly as Art South Dakota, just seeing how much needs to be done with the NEA funding, and then you have NEA funding and state codified law to deal with, and so there's just an awful lot of what is allowable and not allowable and processes in place when you're dealing with both state and federal level government and bureaucracy. So I only mention that of if there's a lot of, well, maybe this, that, it's just because there's a lot to dig through, and it's worth just reaching out to the staff. Another question related to murals from Ashley is just, they're looking at applying for a project as an organization to hire a muralist, but they're really having difficulty even figuring out where to start with what the artist fee might look like. Do you have my personal, from the Art South Dakota side is I would try to find other organizations in the state that you've noticed recently do a mural project, reach out to them. There have been a lot of communities engaged in this. So if you see anything, everyone's more than happy to share their experience. Or if there's a mural artist that you particularly like, it's perfectly reasonable to reach out to them and just say, hey, we're not necessarily ready to work on anything yet, but we're trying to do a grant, and we'd love to get a ballpark figure. Do you have any recommendations or any resources that you give to folks for that kind of a question?
Andrew, your answer is perfect in my opinion, and that is talk to other groups, especially the artists. If you have a few artists in mind, I think actually sitting down to talk a little turkey with them about what those expectations might be would go a long way, ahead of entering into an application or a formal agreement or that type of thing. That said, this would be on the bare minimum side, but Kate, do you recall what we increased our fee to for master artist work? I think it was, I don't want to misspeak here, but
it's $35 an hour,
which I think is actually quite low. There are a lot of things about that grant program where I'm grabbing that number that are also paid for through that grant, things like supplies and travel and some other things. So I'd say $35 an hour would still be pretty low. And I hate to get too specific beyond that.
Yeah, great. And for that question, I know Sisseton has recently done some murals. There have been some murals in Brookings. I also know Campbell County Arts Council in Harrod is currently working on a couple of mural projects. And so there's a lot of activity happening in the state. So definitely reach out to any of those folks, or reach out to us or the Arts Council if you need some connections to some emails to those folks. Great. Let's see here. A question from Michael. He mentions that he sees grant opportunities specifically for collaborating artists, but says that sometimes there's a unique, great opportunity for collaborating organizations beyond their usual scope or budget. Do you have any opportunities or thoughts on organizational collaboration?
I'll just start by saying thank you for that question, Michael. And I think it's a great question. We don't have any specific grant program that speaks to that collaboration in the same way that the Artist Collaboration Grant does. I think the purpose behind the Artist Collaboration Grant was to encourage almost interdisciplinary. I mean, it doesn't have to be that way, but some of the most successful collaborations I think that have come through that grant program have been interdisciplinary. That said, the idea of arts organizations or cultural organizations collaborating, I think, is the way to go, regardless of whether you have a grant that underscores that very concept. So whether it's networking to share ideas or resources, Andrew, I'll say a little bit more, but then if you want to speak to the Community Arts Network after this, that's an opportunity, wonderful. So collaboration in all forms. That said, the South Dakota Arts Council does have one area. It's really, it's more of a special project area, pilot project area, but we have created over the last year and a half a network of participating arts and cultural organizations in a program called Art for Life, which is basically providing, and I should say it's really expanded beyond the original parameters of Art for Life, which was specifically providing intensive arts instruction in elder care facilities, so residence-based facilities. We have branched out and created essentially a network here in South Dakota that's also working with organizations in North Dakota as far as sharing ideas and resources, things that we are supporting with some third-party grant money that we received specifically for creative aging work. So we're still doing, so that would be the kind of thing to contact me if you are interested to talk about that. We have brought a number of communities online in 2022 and are looking to bring a few more on in 2023. And if we're lucky enough, have access to additional funding along those same lines in the future, we could continue to see that as a sustainable network and potentially bringing more communities online. But that would be something, it's really not out there in any of our grant programs. You would need to call and talk to me.
Just a question that pops into my own head with that. If organizations were collaborating, Would that be similar to an individual and an organization not being able to write grants for the same project? So two organizations collaborating couldn't each try to write a grant for that particular project, correct?
Yes, you'll remember, I think early on one of Kate's slides that says we will not fund. I thank you for picking up on that, Andrew. While we encourage collaboration and sharing resources, there does need to be a hard stop in our grant support between projects. So in other words, you know, again, you can't have overlapping funding for the same work.
Great, thanks. Continuing on from that conversation, a question from Steve in Aberdeen. Are there restrictions in partnering with for-profit organizations when applying for project grants, other than not applying for the same project? So as long as the nonprofit is doing the application, is there any dilemma or issue or anything to keep in mind if a large part of that project is collaborating with a for-profit organization?
So the big thing to keep in mind is that we do not allow for fiscal sponsorship. So we can't have our grant dollars being redistributed to any for-profit or non-501c3 organization. So Steve, if you were applying as part of a 501c3 and those funds were directly benefiting your organization and your part of the work that you were doing with that for-profit partner, that would be okay. We just cannot have our funds being streamed into or redistributed to or through an organization to go to a for-profit group or a non-501c3. And this again is really a hard line all the way from the top down. Yeah.
Yeah, great. But if it's a program that they're working on where they're potentially maybe doing outreach to a community and they want to work with a for-profit to bring some of their folks into some performances, that's still their project, their work. That would be okay to collaborate with for-profit, for example.
Yeah, I don't think that we would see a problem with that. It would, and just to remind everyone that we are looking through all the applications that come in. We're not necessarily looking for reading through the entire narrative when we're vetting. To be really honest, at the point in time that we're vetting, we really have if I'm being honest, maybe a 5-day window to go through about 150 applications. So we're reading the high notes really literally to make sure that we are not seeing anything that would be questionable. That would be maybe one, Steve, if you had time to get it in early for a draft review, that might be a good opportunity for you. I know that project grant is pretty lengthy and our timing is a little short here, but that could be an opportunity. And then again, we'd be happy to have those conversations with you offline as well. Yep.
Great, thanks. So a question from Rachel jumping to the collaborating artist grant. Does the person applying need to already have a plan with another artist in place? Or is it the kind of thing where they can apply and then once granted, they can approach the other artist for collaboration? Does it have to be the full payer to do the application?
They would need to have a plan in place so that panelists actually can review those materials. They would be looking at the artistic excellence and the record of activity of both artists, as well as using our grant criteria in that particular grant program to also score the merits of the proposed collaborative activity. So absolutely, you can't, you would need to have a plan and identify another artist and supply all the support materials needed to illuminate that other artist as well to the panelists.
Great. Thanks for that. One more question that came in, and then we'll be getting close to wrapping up here. Hard to believe it's already been almost an hour. This one actually really flew by. So a question, this one was specifically for an artist partnership grant, but I think this would apply, this question would apply for all individual artist grants. If the main project that they're trying to fund ends up having items for sale. For example, if they're trying to fund a project to purchase supplies to create art for an upcoming gallery showing opportunity, does it matter that those final products are being sold for the individual artist grants?
We like the idea of artists being able to earn a living and a wage. So that is not a problem. No, we expect that some of the arts opportunities and events that our grants help support do, and it can get a little weird when you talk about nonprofit versus for-profit, and then ticket sales, we all know are a huge part of the nonprofit world. It's the same for artists. We all need to make a living. So no, that's absolutely okay. And in fact, some artists use that as a way to show match. If you were to, let's say, apply for an artist project grant that requires a match, that is one of the ways you might be able to project income.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Yeah, because it's very hard to necessarily, if you weren't able to take that into account, if it was just funding it all from your own pocket, that makes it very difficult for some to find that match. But being able to then use income from your arts activities is really helpful.
Yeah, Andrew, can I just jump in quick? So we did build like a side slideshow for this presentation just about the budget. And I'll share that out when I share the slide deck with Andrew to post on the Arts South Dakota website. Obviously, we didn't include it in this formal presentation, but those slides will be also posted on our applicant portal. It just really breaks down. Budget is really probably the thing that we get the most questions about. And that really just kind of breaks down, what does it mean to have a cash match? What do cash expenses look like? And then, like I said, the FAQ that's kind of on the tail end of our slideshow, which I can break out for Andrew to post on Arts South Dakota. What we've done is we've kind of, I keep a notebook every year of questions that come in from grantees. It's right behind my phone. And I don't know what those questions are unless you're calling and asking. But I dug into that notebook when we built these FAQs. And so we really tried to address the questions that we get most frequently. Most of them revolve around building the budget and eligibility. So we'll share those out to Andrew as well. You can find them on the Arts South Dakota page, and then I'll get them posted on our applicant portal as soon as I can as well.
Great. Well, I just want to take a moment to say thank you. Thank you so much to Patrick and to Kate for taking the time to join us today and share some great information for these upcoming grant opportunities. And most importantly, thank you all to the attendees for everything you do to help keep South Dakota creative. It's really wonderful that you're here, you're engaged, and you're doing amazing work. I mean, we all know how much great artwork is happening across the state, but I'm still constantly amazed and just so grateful to live in a state that has so much happening. And we're just all so spread out that it's hard to get together, but at least we can get together in square boxes every so often like this, and then at some events like the Governor's Awards in the Arts, and then the every other year Arts Conference and things like that. So please reach out to me at Arts South Dakota or any of the staff, as well as any of the staff at the Arts Council, if you have any questions or anything we can do to be of service. And we will have the slides, as Kate mentioned, as well as the recording of today's session up probably by Monday or Tuesday of next week, and you'll get that email so you can go back and review all the information. So thank you both again so much for joining us, and wishing everyone a really wonderful weekend ahead.
Thank you so much, Andrew and Arts South Dakota, and thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate it.